Hey everyone, welcome back to FPL Fran. Today's video is going to be a slightly different video. It's a bench boost game week 3 team selection. The idea is really just revisiting the team selection that I had and just thinking that there is actually probably another viable strategy in place, and it is going to be the bench boost for game week 3. I don't think this is absolutely crazy. I think all of you know that I went with a very, very deep bench to start the season. Unfortunately, as things have unraveled, players like Reece James have been injured, and therefore if I had the opportunity to actually reduce the bench but also get some great options that have good fixtures in the short term. So someone like Malo Gusto is an essential option, gets to play versus Luton Town where he has effectively a 50% clean sheet odd, and it's a very good opportunity to then capitalize on playing him this weekend. But when you actually look at the team, extremely strong defense. So I had to sort of bench Gusto. I had to bench Saliba as well. I went for the triple attacking fullbacks, but just revisiting that, the only weak player on my bench this week, if I choose to spend my additional second free transfer on a forward, is going to be Turner. And ultimately, usually our keeper is always going to be the worst player on the bench boost. Sometimes our keeper is very often the one with the double game week fixtures, but usually one of those double game week fixtures are poor because that bench keeper is always from a weaker team. In this case, we have this sort of weak fixture with Man United away with Turner, but I still think this is a good opportunity to capitalize on the bench boost because the actual bench itself have very, very strong fixtures and the clean sheet odds are very, very good, which is why Saliba and Gusto are very good. As far as Saliba, I also think the reason why he's becoming such a strong option is because now that he's sort of that default center back, he's going to get a lot more baseline BPS. And as I've seen with sort of models and how they've projected points, Saliba seems to be the best Arsenal defender just because of the increase in the bonus points. We talked about early in the season how, for example, the expected goals for Saliba weren't particularly good. But given that he's that sort of central center back, it's very, very nice to benefit from that as well. So I think that's why Saliba has become such a strong asset as of late. And of course, it's inevitably the case with the Gabriel news, which is just unfortunately the way things have unfolded. And in terms of the midfield, though, if I do choose to go for a bench boost, I will be keeping Kai Havertz, of course, someone who's absolutely terrorized me in terms of FPL points as of late, double blanks, and even, for example, getting a yellow card in a 96-minute feature in the previous match was Crystal Palace. But if I, let's say, choose to spend one of my free transfers on one of the forwards, I have to sort of persist with Kai Havertz for this week. I still think there are fantastic options to go for next week, and someone like Sterling is still a good pick to go for next week. On top of that, I think City have such a good game that with some money in the bank, which I do have here, the 0.4 million in the bank, I can still go for someone like Foden next week, which in my opinion is actually going to be my transfer target for the time being. So I've gone with Saka, Havertz, Rashford, Fernandes, and Mbumo. Obviously, with the United assets, you can probably argue that there is an opportunity for us to move away from them next week if they continue to blank. But I would say if you take a little bit more of a longer term look at their fixtures, they still are a team that we expect to do well. And of course, with Mount out, we have yet to see whether United will sort of revert back to how good they were as an attack in the previous season. So that's one thing that I'm keeping my eye open for. And it is going to be a very aggressive play where I just think, yes, United might be a team that are slightly worse than we expected based on last year, but still, this is a Nottingham Forest fixture. I can capitalize on that. And ultimately, there aren't too many transfer targets that are more expensive than United picks, where it feels like I'm trapping myself from a kind of cost and budget point of view, especially since I don't have Salah in my team. So, Mbuma, of course, and Saka, very easy keeps, even though Saka has lost penalties. We don't really know whether that's 100% certain. I think there is a chance, based on the press conferences of someone like Odegaard, that you could maybe see someone like Saka become the penalty taker in situations where maybe, let's say, the game isn't at stake and it's not 0-0. So, for example, let's say if Arsenal's 2-0 up and there's a penalty, there's a very high likelihood that Saka could still take the penalty. I'm not exactly sure whether, for example, Odegaard has become the default penalty taker based on what Arteta has said and also what Odegaard himself has said. And then actually, if we look at my forwards this week, I'm choosing to go with Alvarez, spending my second free transfer there. Instead of, let's say, getting Kai Havertz out of my team for game week 3, I'm going to be taking Mount for game week 4 instead. So therefore, Alvarez joins the team. He replaces Taylor, who's previously on my bench, just a 4.5 million forward who was just locked up. And then I'm going with Alvarez, Haaland, and João Pedro. Now, the way I see Alvarez working for my team is that in 2 weeks' time, or maybe around game week 6, let's say, if I roll the free transfer on game week 5 and I do a free transfer to remove Havertz from my team, who's probably the biggest, sore thumb in this team in game week 4, I will have 2 free transfers in game week 6 to then address going towards someone like Trippier. So if, for example, Alvarez seems to be struggling for minutes by game week 6, then I can actually just transfer him out. Or I can do the same with João Pedro too. And since I have so much money already spent on the defense, it's not actually that hard to go into someone like Trippier. Someone like Shaw can make way for Trippier as long as I, for example, move from João Pedro to a 4.5 forward, like an Archer that we already have now available, or even going from Alvarez towards Archer should actually allow me to get a lot more money in the bank, allow me to respread those funds into going for Trippier and these Newcastle defenders that we're trying to prioritize. At the same time, I can also see myself doing something like keeping a very similar team in place, maybe moving one of the Man United midfielders, because let's say if Rashford and Fernandes continue to do poorly, I might just keep one of them in my team, might actually make Rashford my cash cow, and then actually upgrade someone like Alvarez in the near future, or the same with João Pedro. So this is sort of how I'm envisioning my team. It's a very, very strong team. Ultimately, everyone except for Turner has a very, very good fixture in my personal opinion. All the odds are very good for the defenders when it comes to clean sheets. I have very, very strong attacking fullbacks, even someone like Gusto, who I think is outrageously underpriced, just for the context of, let's say, game weeks 4 and 5. And so that's why I'm actually changing up my team selection, going for the bench boost. Now, of course, I will not be making the transfer in Alvarez yet. I need to wait for the press conferences tomorrow, but this is going to be a potential viable option. I think it makes sense for someone like myself where I'm not taking any -4s to go for this bench boost here. If you are doing a bench boost, I would not advise you to do it if you have to take a hit. If you take a hit for a -4 or -8 on a single game week for a bench boost, it doesn't really scream any good value to me. However, if you're just spending your free transfers and you're getting a very strong bench boost like this, potentially, then it could work out. When I actually look at my team here, I could actually go for Jackson as well. But the reason why I've not gone for Jackson for the time being is because personally, I think one of my transfers out for Havertz next week are going to be someone like a Havertz to Sterling combination, like I, for example, suggested in Game Week 3 in my initial team selection. So that option will not be on the cards if I go for Jackson, because I will already be tripled up on Chelsea. And on top of that too, I think the option of being flexible, let's say having the money in the bank to actually go towards Foden, who's actually now 7.6 million, as opposed to Havertz, who's 7.4 million, is also something I want to do. If I go for Jackson, I've got 0 in the bank, and I am a little bit too inflexible just because I want options to go out of Havertz. And I really want to see what happens, with how Pep continues to line up. And of course, we know Pep is actually going to be in Spain for the next 2 fixtures. So very high chance, in my opinion, that we can actually see similar Man City lineups until he comes back and maybe actually once again changes the formation and things like that. So that's going to be my bench boost Game Week 3 team selection, something that I've actually come up with quite late on the fly. I've thought about the bench boost all week, to be honest, but it didn't really seem like a real possibility until we had the all clear in terms of fitness, in terms of all these players, and specifically the fitness concerns over Enciso as well has made me change my mind in terms of how viable this bench boost is. Because João Pedro, if let's say he was coming off the bench, that would completely sort of capitulate the way this bench boost would look. And I'm pretty happy with the way that it looks right now with the 15 players that I have for this bench boost with no hits taken. So that's going to be my bench boost Game Week 3 team selection. As long as we have the all clear on the press conferences tomorrow, let me know what you guys think. Is it too aggressive a strategy? Would you save the bench boost for later this season? One of the reasons as well why I'm actually going for the bench boost at this point in time of the season is because a lot of the leading fixture planners that we have in FPL, they're all unanimously agreeing that we won't likely have huge double game weeks this season. Now, of course, we can have some crazy events. For example, we can have another death of a monarch or things like that. But let's be honest, I think there is a good balance of probabilities that nothing like that will crazily happen. I also think when you look at the bench boost, the value of the bench boost is always who's on the bench. So when you look at my bench here, in reality, it's actually Gusto, probably you'd say Saliba and João Pedro and Turner. So these are players with great fixtures and they're very, very cheaply priced. So it actually is quite a simple bench boost to do without actually doing anything too aggressive. And so for this reason, I feel like my team remains flexible for the time being, and we can actually operate with this bench boost going forwards. And even if, let's say, the bench boost isn't working out so well in terms of how I'm navigating my transfers in the short term, I still think that this team can land itself towards a wildcard 9 rather quickly. So that's sort of my initial thoughts on the bench boost and why I'm going with this sort of Game Week 3 bench boost. So thank you guys so much for watching, and I'll see you guys in the next video.